Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "It is by being wounded that power grows, and in the end can become tremendous." We've all experienced the double-edged sword of life, and we've all developed scar tissue based on life's events, based on things that we've been through in our life from all different areas. And the culture that we live in provides us an endless array of opportunities for us to develop more wounds. And it's how we deal with those wounds that ultimately allows our power to grow, allows us to be in our power, and allows us to transmute the ills of our past into the miracles of our present and the miracles of our ever unfolding future. And I find it interesting that when an animal that's in wild nature, when they develop a wound, when they develop an injury, their innate instinct is to do three different things. And the first thing is to hide. They find a dark cave or somewhere to hide in isolation. They get very quiet. They stop moving around. They stop eating as the third behavior. They completely stop eating altogether. And this is the concept in our society that we're completely disconnected from, is this the art of fasting, the idea of fasting, the idea that we actually need to lighten the load on our digestive system in order to activate healing faculties in our body and in our psyche, in our mind. One of the things I've noticed is that when people endure emotional fluctuations, emotional typhoons of some sort or another, the instinct in our culture is to start loading up on food, start loading up on carbohydrates, start loading up on sugar, start loading up on ice cream, fats and things of this nature, to start nullifying the emotional response that's indicating that something is out of alignment in our life. And I encourage everyone to start looking into this idea of lightening the load, this idea of fasting. One of the things I love about raw plant food and the whole idea of moving closer to nature's brilliance, nature's innate intelligence, is that raw food is a natural calorie restriction diet that doesn't require a necessary restriction. It just requires that we continually upgrade our food choices until we get to that place of homeostasis. We get to that equilibrium point where we have a balanced blood sugar, where we're no longer dependent on the food addictions that we've all grown up with. Every single one of us has grown up with some kind of physical and mental addiction to some kind of food that was used as a crutch, essentially, to our emotions, to our mental constraints, to giving our power away and essentially giving our attention to something else other than what's going on inside of us. And when we start to cleanse the palate, we start to clear out the piping system, what ends up happening is energy has a clear channel to flow. More energy can flow through the system, and essentially more oxygen can go to our brain. We can think better, and more blood goes to our heart, so we can get into our heart. One of the reasons we have this epidemic of heart disease is because we've encased our heart in stone. We've gotten out of our heart. We've gotten so deep into our psyche, into our head, that we've disconnected from our heart, from the heart chakra. And that's a big issue behind all physiological dis-ease, is the emotional stagnation that we exhibit in society. And by activating fasting in our life, and by practicing what they did in the Sabbath, or in Hebrew, to cease, the Sabbath, which is to basically take 6 days of work and take the seventh day off, right? The story of creation. The heavens and earth were constructed in 6 days, and the creator, the god or goddess, took the seventh day off to rest and to replenish and to rejuvenate and to reflect. And I invite everyone to kind of structure their life in this way. Start to think about how we can actually take that wisdom into our world. That's what Sunday actually is. It's a day to get out into the sun and to rejoice, to celebrate, to reflect, and to lighten the load of the week, so we can become better conduits for the week ahead. We can do better work. We can be better versions of ourselves for the work ahead. And I really like the tradition of the Essenes, right? And the great book, The Essene Gospel of Peace by Edmund Bordock Szekely. I read that years and years ago when I first got into raw food, and the Essene Gospel of Peace. And that book really brought some incredible wisdom, some incredible philosophy about the nature of what spirituality is and what it could be, and how our behaviors, the substances we put into our body, how that affects our spiritual agenda or direction in the world, and how it just affects our energy cycles, how we're calibrating, how we're channeling our energy in the world. And this idea that the Essenes were an ancient group of or congregation of people that had a very specific spiritual and philosophical direction in the world. And one of the practices that led the Essenes to their depicted longevity, their renowned longevity status in history, was this idea of fasting. And the way that they did it was, for every year of your life, say, for example, you were 10 years old, then you would fast 10 days in that year. If you're 30 years old, you would fast 30 days in that year. Now, this doesn't have to be done 30 days straight. It's just within that given year, you take the time, you kind of organize it however it works for you. You could take 3 days, every month, or kind of do the math and see how that works for you. But the idea is that for every year of your life, or how old you are, you take that much time out of every single year. And that they were renowned in their longevity. And we do know fasting potentiates certain growth hormones. Human growth hormone, for example, is activated by the act of fasting, specifically intermittent fasting. And this is something I recommend that everyone explore and start to play with. This is what I like to practice in my life, and what I've found actually helps keep me in my dietary equilibrium. It keeps me in my synchronization of my mind and my body, and keeps my energy flowing, is this idea of intermittent fasting. And it's basically, in the morning, your body's in a detox mode. Your body is in a natural catabolic mode, where it's breaking down the residual material that you've consumed the day before, the days before, weeks before, even years before, and it's starting to break it down, and it's moving it out of the body, right? That's why we go to the bathroom when we wake up, ideally. And it's also pushing out, it's diluting all the acid waste products. That's why the first thing you do in the morning is you drink water. And I recommend drinking water with a little bit of sea salt to help balance your blood sugar, to help remineralize you, to help restructure that water that you're drinking, and to essentially re-adrenalize, to power back your adrenal glands. Because every time you get up, you're signaling adrenaline. That's what allows us to get up and move around, right? So we want to replenish that battery pack. And the best way to do it is to drink water and salt in the morning, and then coast as long as you can in the morning on liquids. I recommend doing the water and salt, and then moving into possibly a tea, some kind of tonic, doing green vegetable juice. Start with liquids in the morning and start to move down the corridor of your day, going into something a little heavier, going into like a smoothie. And then after that, going into, maybe some kind of cucumber and avocado with pumpkin seed kind of snack, or some kind of fruit, and then migrate towards heavier foods as your day progresses. And then by the time sun goes down, the moon rises up, that's when we start to activate the second tier of our intermittent fasting, which is the 4 hours at least before you go to bed, you don't eat anything. You don't eat anything. You just stick to liquids. That could be a nightcap off. That could be some kind of like kava root, valerian, mamaki tea, or some non-caffeinated, even non-theobrominated tea, unless cacao works for you that way. I find for me, a little bit of cacao actually helps to relax my blood vessels. It helps to relax my muscular system. And it actually, I don't really have too much problem getting to sleep, as long as I balance it with something that's non-stimulatory, like a reishi mushroom, like a kava, like a valerian root, something of that nature that calms the nerves. Anyway, so that's the idea between intermittent fasting. And we do know that it activates longevity genetics, longevity hormone secretions in our body that start to tank out because of the overaccumulation in our diet over time that starts to put too much stress on our digestive system and our enzymatic support, our metabolic enzymes. They lose their ability to function systemically. They lose their ability to actually break down that food, to break down that old wear and tear, to break down the scar tissue of past trauma that's been done to our body, that's been done to our psyche. The enzymes are trying to repair every frontier of our body. And if we're stuffing food down our throat every 5 minutes and our blood sugar, we're hypoglycemic, we need to eat something to keep that blood sugar balanced, then we're going to stay in a perpetual food addiction. We're going to be addicted to substances that make us feel normal, that make us feel regulated somehow. And the idea behind fasting is getting off the addictions of the world, challenging our addictions essentially, allowing us to gain re-sovereignty of our faculties so we don't have to rely on the substances of the world to keep us going, right? It's that old saying that I am in this world, but I'm not of this world. We are ennobled beings in this world, and we have the power to self-govern our reality and how we interact with the reality. And that's going to come from taking control of our entire faculties, right? And fasting is probably the best way from A to Z to start doing that. So however that fits for you, I recommend people start with intermittent fasting and play with that idea, and then start studying the Seeing Gospel of Peace and all the great spiritual traditions in the world throughout history that all recommended that we take time off, we abstain from certain behaviors and certain additives in our life for in a periodic fashion, so we can regain our full faculties and we can activate longevity characteristics. And that essentially is part of this whole puzzle right here is getting off all the substances so we can regain our power and we can become better and more illuminated beings in the world.